Greetings. My name is Michael Miller. This is a Michael Miller trademark training video out to you because you're watching. Thank you and welcome. It's meant for Michael Miller Pilates licensed affiliates, the core to core, and anyone interested in surviving and thriving as a Pilates instructor. English is the only language I have, and so in every other language I apologize for not being able to speak to you in your own tongue. So, for as much as I know how to make a presentation when you're talking to people, insofar as the rule is to tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them, right? Which is part of that merry-go-round of spaced repetition and the way you learn something. And what I realize is I've been reluctant to tell you what I'm going to tell you before I tell you, and then try to summarize. Maybe that's all too much. But we'll, and especially today, because there's like 8 titles. So here comes 8 titles. 900 is title number 1. 1.5 is, how do you do Pilates? How do you do Pilates? No, not how. Why? Why do you do Pilates? Then number 2 is, if it's not going to be fun, why show up, in quotes. Number 3 is, you choose to participate even in the context of your own making. Number 4 is, the Pilates union of body, mind, and spirit happens in the individual. Number 5 is, getting a grip is one thing, deepening your grip is another. I didn't have your in there, or your grip in there. Grip is another. Number 6 is the inconvenient truth about Pilates. Number 7 is, doing Pilates is like brushing your teeth. And number 8 is, the last Pilates exercise. So I should probably talk about that first. But I'm not going to, because I want to. Mondays are always tough because they're compilations of 3 days worth of notes. And so that was my first thing, was tell them what you're going to tell them, and tell them, and then tell them what you told them. And that's, excuse me. That is the best way to have your message sink in. I can't believe I have a hoarse voice already. So number 1 is the just 900 an exclamation mark, because because why? Because 9 is the number of the hermit, and here are greeting cards that I've either gotten sent to me or picked up on my own. But humans living isolatedly, inscribing what they see, what they make what they see, reflecting. So the number of the hermit, 9, is out of the tarot. To me, it symbolizes the experience that builds up underneath us, taking us out of the valley of innocence into the pinnacle of our experience. And that becomes our perspective from which we either hold a lantern or not. But we're isolated in that perspective because we're isolated insofar as the experience that we've had that gives us the point of view from which we view, the place or the source from which we have to construct our point of view. And from there, so broadcasting it, hold out the light or not, okay, blah, blah. The thing is, it's in my nature. It's in my nature to do this. And the thing of 900 is astonishing to me that anything has lasted that long. The strength of the routine that I've been lucky enough to pursue, where I take notes before and during the intermediate reformer workout, and then try to organize them right thereafter and come share them with you. So that sort of blows me away. I'm astonished and then peaceful. I think for all of us, every human being, in some way, needs an opportunity to, or feels better and achieves more peace if they at least, profess what they have to profess. They share with their art, whatever it is. They get a chance to make their art, whether or not it ever gets seen or shared. Right? So, it's not as though what I'm trying to share with you is something that I've made up. And sharing with you, as much as I feel, it's just something I'm trying to get out in expressing my point of view. That movie on Ramanujan, the mathematician, I encourage you to see that, and maybe it will in some way help you find peace the way it helped me find peace in being a Pilates instructor, and knowing that what you know and it all funnels into the moment that you're in and resonates out from there. So let me go on to number 1.5. Why do you do Pilates? And I have no expansion notes or any of this. I did come up with why I do Pilates. I did come up with why I do Pilates. But why do you do Pilates? Why do you do Pilates? Okay. And I suppose it wouldn't be fair of me to just go on and not share with you my point of view, because that's what this is all about. I do Pilates for the experience. I do Pilates to achieve that state of being in the body where I feel like I'm completely coordinated, being, thinking, and observing. Now that's the MMP verbiage to explain what I'm talking about, but the fact is I do Pilates for the experience. And I think that experience is already defined by Joseph Pilates. And why do I do Pilates for that experience? Because it brings me peace. And it brings me peace, I think, because my being, thinking, and observing has to find connection among themselves, coordination. And in so doing makes me more present as a human being. And present means like in the moment. And it's in the moment where you either survive or don't survive when push comes to shove. Or when the immediacy of the moment comes to bear. And how well you've conditioned yourself to meet that moment determines your survival. But I do it for the experience, because I think I have way too much observing in me, way too much thinking in me, and way too much being in me that's all raging in their own right or pressing to It's the complete coordination as a sensation that I experience. It's an experience that is why I do Pilates. Number two, a good friend of mine who is no longer with us in the flesh used to say, if it's not going to be fun, why show up? If it's not going to be fun, why show up? And so I share that with you as a question to ask yourself when you question what the future holds, or what you want to do, or what in terms of being an instructor and having a student. No matter who the student is, and no matter what the circumstances are, if it's not going to be fun, why show up? And in asking the question, what I'm pointing to is that when you approach it that way, you're choosing your attitude. And in so choosing to aim for fun, right? It sets the stage for the result that you want, which is fun. You know, if my student says, man, that was more fun than I could tell you, I don't care how good it was by any other standard. Because, why? Because if it's fun, they're going to come back. If it's fun, they engaged in it. They had fun. And as an experience, right? Pilates is fun. It's way fun. Number three. It's out there. It's a little esoteric, but it's this whole thing of 900 days. Over the last 900 days, I've broadcast on weekdays and done an intermediate reformer every day as the routine that's been in place. I know there have been times when I've missed or haven't been able to, but by far and away, the routine is there, and the routine itself exists. See, the routine exists in its own right. And when you're used to doing a routine that exists in its own right, how you fare against the routine is a reflection of how you are compared to the routine you're trying to perform, or that you're used to doing. Right? See that? The routine gives you something to aspire toward when you feel like shrinking away from it or your movement. And it's something that encourages you forward when it seems easier than normal. Number four. The Pilates union of body, mind, and spirit happens in the individual. Number five. Getting a grip is one thing, deepening a grip is another. So as an instructor, it's just so fun to teach from the point of view that I call my own, and that I profess to be the point of view of MMP, represented by this brand that looks at the original work of Joseph Pilates and theorizes there's an ideal within it based on the evidence of definition, promise, and sequence. And what's so cool about this point of view is that it's rooted in reality, and And I think that's what lends itself so much to being sensational, so that when you have a person hold a towel with flat fingers against the meat of their hand, and challenge that grip, and then you give them a curled grip and challenge that grip, and you ask them, which one is muy fuerte or stronger? Hmm? Hmm? An MMP minded Pilates instructor, they float within the sensational as their means of communication, because there's so much to sense. Number six, and I guess that's where I was headed anyway, or the inconvenient truth about Pilates is that Pilates has an essence of its own. That's really inconvenient. Now that's inconvenient for anybody that wants to make of Pilates something other than what it is. And so, easy to ignore if it gets in your way. The essence, that is easy to ignore if it gets in your way of making believe whatever you want. This is just my point of view, okay? But from my point of view, the ideal within Joe's original work is recognizable in body, in mind, and in spirit. In MMP, that's in being, in thinking, and observing, but by whatever words you want to use. Part of its essence is structure as a language, which is so valuable to a Pilates instructor when they realize there's a grammar imbued right in Joe's choreography. It's like if you watched enough Balanchine ballets and you had the opportunity to watch them at your own rate, so if you watch them fast, it's easier to see the pattern emerge when the time frame is different. And in recognizing the patterns maybe just in recognizing anything from watching movement, any recognition of pattern gives you a sense of confidence about choosing what you do next with a student, dancing with your awareness of those patterns. Flexion, extension, side bending, rotation, and torsion, and that they're progressive in complexity, and the kind of space that they take up, and they're ideal in nature. They're ideal in nature. They're ideal in the real world, in nature. So, within the point of view of MMP, the inconvenient truth about Pilates is that it has an essence of its own, is that there's an experience connected to the definition, is that the choreography is ideal in nature, And there's all these sub-bullets to how it's ideal, but I don't want to go there. When I took notes that Pilates has an essence of its own, the essence is ideal and it's real. It's ideal and real. You reach toward the ideal represented, and a very real experience comes out of it. Not only complete coordination of body, mind, and spirit as a state of being in the body in the moment of the doing, but also in the response of the body to the conditioning that you put it through. You not only do the movement patterns, but you do them uniformly engaged. And the inconvenient truth, see, it's got to be galling in a way, or just, I don't know, just beyond the scope of how one views things. That's why just two things from me, right? Have a hold of two things from me. Those two things are what? In what order? CT and MMP. Hold those two as anvils for your work. CT is what? Coronary tension. Coronary tension is what? Oppositional rotation between axes. What the hell does that mean? Well, here's your arms. Can you see rotation happening along that line? Well, yes. Can you imagine a line going through your ears and having your head rotating around the imaginary line through your ears? Yes. Rotate your palms down and your chin up. As you rotate your palms up and curl around your ears, look straight ahead. Pull away from an unwanted kiss to bring your ears back in line with your shoulders. And that tension between the rotation around the ears in one direction and the rotation around the axis running through your shoulders in another creates coronary tension. And that's oppositional rotation between axes. It's fundamental. It's biomechanics. Just because there hasn't been research done on it or acknowledgement on a broader scientific basis, as the Pilates instructor, you don't need to care about the facts or not of the physics, as long as you're not putting your client at risk, which this doesn't take you there, and you get good results from it. See, as an instructor, when you can take a human being who has great capacity in their being, meaning in their body, they're really gifted, and they're very smart. Their thinking is all right with you, right? Or there anyway. They're very smart, right? And they're very alert. They're very keen. They're very sensitive to the world around them. Okay? That's like a car being driven automatically that's what I want to say. That's like a really good car looking for a good driver. When it comes to doing Pilates, and somebody wants to do Pilates, and they've been a master instructor and the head of their own training program for decades, right? And they've never been in better shape. If it's not going to be fun, why show up? And in the fun, you know what you're after, whether they do or not. And if they do, they're all up for it and just as eager to chase the ball as a beginner student. See, the nature of the desire, I think, is the nature is the same regardless of the degree of experience or capability. And the more experienced and the more capable you are, the more you're really looking to surrender yourself to the guidance of an instructor so that you can chase the ball instead of throwing it as an instructor. So remember, the whole thing about this broadcast is to survive and thrive as a Pilates instructor. So if you're a student of Pilates, enjoy yourself and try to stay that way for as long as possible, because eventually, in my opinion, your desire to be a better student will take you into the necessity of teaching to get that reflection back into your own practice. Number 7, doing Pilates is like brushing your teeth. Doing Pilates is like brushing your teeth. Well, that's like more of a nag and a nuisance that you've heard all your life, and that probably you still do, because if you don't, then you've suffered consequences of not. See? So when you don't, what did I say there? Brushing your teeth. When you don't brush your teeth will fall out. And when you don't do Pilates, your body will fall apart. Now, other conditioning might substitute for whatever to keep your body from falling apart, because there's, the 10,000 things of what else to do besides Pilates. In MMP, the inconvenient truth about Pilates is that it has an essence of its own. And yet the empowering thing for an instructor aware of that point of view can at least take on the perspective of who they are as an instructor, what their purpose is, what their aim is, what the language is, and how to speak it, and how to do all of that under the surface, where you're a swan above the surface, just being present with your student, protecting them, and throwing the ball so they can enjoy chasing it. So 7, yeah. And in that way, so see, it's not very glamorous, this inconvenient truth. The reason it's inconvenient is because really doing Pilates, doing the choreography, pursuing the poem on a routine that makes it effective, like daily or Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, or Tuesday, Thursdays, and Saturdays. And even if that's only studying in your mind's eye, to keep yourself familiar with the sequence so that you can go to depth in your effort because of your familiarity. That's why familiarity is so important. And yet the mundaneness of brushing your teeth is the same mundaneness of doing Pilates, is that it's this thing you do to maintain what you've got. Okay, so I know you're all waiting for number 8, the last Pilates exercise. What could that be? What is the last Pilates exercise? Well, let me draw out the suspense and make it hopefully a shared story for you to draw from. Back in the day, I had someone from someplace that sounded, by its pronunciation, pretty hoity-toity, and the student was an instructor out at that place far away and wanted a lesson. And so, not always, but a lot of times I like to put a person on a Cadillac seated with their feet pressing up against the poles, holding up the roll-down bar, a lot like putting a person in a car and giving them the steering wheel. I mean, they're supported in the arena that they're in. You know, they got control of something, the bar, and really the springs on the bar are helping hold their arms up so that they're not so heavy. I don't tell them any of that. So, this Pilates instructor there for a lesson, there for my student, I come in and put him there because I don't know how they do or how they move. And I said, okay, roll down and roll up. Or I took him through a roll down and a roll up, and it was like butter, as in B-U-T-T-E-R, but D-D instead, but butter. A slang use of the word butter, but it was like butter, meaning so smooth, right? And I immediately got scared as an instructor. What am I going to do with this person? And they'd signed a release, and I had insurance, and out on that, you don't know how thick the ice is, but as an instructor, I said, okay, come off of there, stand over there, which was looking at the Cadillac from a bit of a distance, but not too far. And I came up onto the Cadillac, stood on the Cadillac, grabbed the bars, and did an inversion. So that's the last exercise I'm talking about. An inversion. Not just upside down anywhere in space, but 5 points on a straight line. Much the way the long stretch is for the same reasons. I mean, until you really have hammered the connection of 5 points, you do yourself a disservice by trying to make it all line up in 6. Because you want the control and the connection closer to core before you end up going to the plantar flexion to put 6 points in a line. What points am I talking about? These are points. These are end points. And the end points are the end point of the axis of rotation that the human body is capable of engaging in, has evolved the capacities of doing. So, what did I do? Why do I consider it the last exercise? Because where do you go in the body from the beginning of the mat to the end of the mat? You go from supine to standing, right? Well, where do you go from the end of the mat to the last exercise is just my way of looking at it. But the reason I'm looking at it that way is because you go in the Pilates mat to going vertical, to being aligned in space. And when you do an inversion, a straight up and down inversion, not piking and extension, all this other stuff, but just the clear, clean, hanging from your hands, inverted, aligned in space, and everything calm. That's the last exercise. Because it's a true test of how connected you are in your endpoints. You know, if you can be lined up standing up, that's great. If you're really lined up as you wish to be standing, then turning upside down and just hanging from your hands isn't any different. So you can imagine, maybe not, but imagine, if you will, an experienced instructor coming in and being very agreeable and doing the roll down and roll up well and willing to take that level of instruction, and yet saying, okay, stand over there. And then here, I rarely do something like this where I demonstrate, because their image of me in their mind is not what I want so much as their remembrance of being in the cave of their own sensation. But this was going right to the heart of the matter and saying, okay, can you do this? Can you do an inversion? And so I showed it to him, and his eyes got really big, and he was very enthusiastic, of course, to do something on such a large scale. So far away from center, so much control, and the risk, it's so dangerous. Now, where was I standing as he did this? Right? Within reach of deflecting his fall to the point where he wouldn't land on his head or his neck. Is how I would describe where I was and what I was concerned about. But when he came up to it and easily had the position, and I think I told him beforehand, don't try to outlast your grip, right? That's not the point here. So when your grip is challenged, it's over. Come out. He was very strong, all three capacities. But what did I give him? I give him something to listen to. Right? An alignment. And the lesson was in this exotic trade-off between releasing muscular tension, which was, say, stressful, and engaging in muscular tension that was beneficial. And so it's as much of what you let go of in having that capacity to hang upside down from your ribs, as there is at all what you clench. And so, what's the lesson from this story? Is that when I felt confident I could move a little further away, that he was in control of everything, in my look at things, I don't think I can show this with a dark shirt and everything, but he was shoulders round in his effort. I mean, he was upside down still, but shoulders were rounded forward and hunched, I call it, rather than an open, clean chest. So, as a Pilates instructor, what did I discover? What did I discover? I discovered an end to something where I could pick up the string and pursue further. Because coming out of that, the question for me as the instructor was, without ever discussing it with the student, was, is he tight in his body where his shoulders cannot open up? Or can his shoulders open up and just don't know how to engage that way? Okay? And so the conclusion or the takeaway from that, for me, to you, as an instructor, is that the body reveals itself, right? And the more sophisticated the body's degree of control, the more challenge the body needs to be able to have a discernment about what's there or what's not. So in all of this talk about the last exercise, you've gotten this notion that Michael Miller thinks the inversion on Cadillac, holding a straight line in stillness, is the last exercise. And I think that because it's a challenge to do that, and it means that you actually have control of your body and space to be able to be calm and do that. Now, I'm not saying you necessarily have to be engaging in core new tension to do that, or that you've ever heard of core new tension, or that your musculature, I'm not saying it's necessary, but I am saying this way works really well. And in this instance, I was able to take a person skating out on, teaching Pilates is like taking a student ice skating. You take them by their hands and you go out on the ice and you stay close to shore where the ice is really thick and there's no risk of falling through. But as they get more control, you skate them further out to where the ice gets thinner. Both metaphorically and sensationally, and by how much support the body has or doesn't have to accomplish the effort. But all of that, right, is to call upon the student to listen to observe their sensation, because it's through their observing that it's through the coordinating of their being, thinking, and observing that makes them more present and gives them more control, which is the target or the subject of Joe's method. You can get this. You can get this. And the simple parts, the best parts are the synthesized definition. Just memorize the definition without even understanding what it means. Memorize Joe's definition without even understanding what it means. And then you already have an understanding of what it means. If you're totally complacent with what you already know and not really interested in seeing things any differently than you already do, then you should have turned this off a long time ago. Because CT is way ahead of its time, and I'm suspecting that CT will be more easily to recognize and acknowledge, and from that recognition and acknowledgement, MMP as a POV, Michael Miller-Pilates as a point of view, will then have some real foundation to expand upon. I had a note about in the year 4040, that's 4040, that's 2022 years from now. 2022 years from now. Core new tension will be old hat. I just really think that'll have to be. And then from core new tension, as I just said, MMP will have a stronger basis of credibility. The Joe stories I heard about said that he was disappointed that the medical community didn't take him more seriously, and yet it's only because of their limitation, not his methods, that is so. It's only what they can afford to admit or acknowledge about what is or it isn't from what their field of authority is. And it's all so simple. It's just whether or not you're willing to look at that point of view or through that point of view. And it's not complicated or threatening to any other discipline or methodology or belief or religion. MMP is just a theory about Pilates having an ideal within it. And I did make that point somewhere in my notes. The MMP point of view considers the reality of Pilates straight out of Joe's book. So the connection that you get from this point of view is between you and Joe. Think about that one. The authority about what Pilates is or isn't comes from your understanding of Joe's own words and the experience that comes from them. Joe is the messenger. Joe's message is apparent, it's obvious. My point of view is only one point of view. Copernicus's point of view was only Copernicus's point of view. And he was wise enough not to publish his point of view while he was living. Something you learn from that. And Einstein's point of view is only Einstein's point of view. And his point of view keeps gaining credibility all the time. Bruce Lee's point of view was and is only Bruce Lee's point of view. But he took his field somewhere new. Martial arts somewhere new Bruce Lee took. I don't mean to talk like Yoda. Astronomy and physics. Einstein took someplace new. And Copernicus took astronomy someplace new. He took humanity's understanding of itself someplace beyond the contemporary, conventional point of view. And I share this with you only to arm you with where the point of view to me lines up with other points of view. So that you don't expect it to stand among equals when it's not. It can't be. It's just transcendent because it steps beyond the conventional, contemporary, presumed view of tradition as the only means of legitimacy, let alone as any means. So yes, I'm sorry to admit it. No, I'm not. But for you to understand where MMP is coming from, and the originator or the founder of MMP, yes, compares himself to Einstein, Copernicus, and Bruce Lee. And I do that only because if the shoe fits and it helps you be the instructor, you're aware that MMP goes beyond the conventional contemporary way of viewing Pilates. And somehow, where did we start? It seems like I'm back at the beginning. Why do you do Pilates? I do it for the experience and for the peace it gives me, the focus it gives me, the presence it gives me. I do Pilates because I find myself in Pilates. And as a Pilates instructor, there's no higher privilege than standing on the escarpment of the human experience, aware that regression is possible. Regression meaning going backwards, meaning being hurt. I got to work with a precious client once who was in a terrible accident, and through my best intentions caused a bruise to happen. And we both knew where it came from and how it happened, and I was working with her routinely, and I offered to have her work with anyone else, but no, she liked the familiarity with me. But she also, when we got to that exercise and that point, she goes, I still feel it right where you hurt me. And I don't laugh, it substitutes for crying, but it's painful as an instructor to work with someone toward a common goal when you know that something you did set you back. And why am I telling? I'm talking about standing with your student and all of this majesty surrounding it, but right next to it, you're shaking. I'm shaking in my boots, aware of the potential for things headed south, things going south. That's my expression. When things go south, they go the way you don't expect them to. If you're the instructor and you're standing in front of them, mimicking their arms out on the short spine, not the short spine, side splits on the reformer, you're facing them, and all of a sudden they start waving their arms like this, falling away from you. The only thing you can do from where you're standing is wave. And that's a very bad feeling as an instructor. And it only has to happen to you once, or hear about it from somebody else, to know that yes, it's nice to be out there leading the band, but not if your band member might fall into the gutter. Romano once said, everything going on right now is important. What I'm saying, where I'm standing, how I'm touching, where I'm looking, what's happening at the front desk. Really, I think we all laugh and we realize that she was present in a lot of space. And it takes that kind of dedication, might be a good word, toward the safety of your client, to always appear that everything is effortless and there's no concern, because you don't have to inject concern into the situation. Let me not be specific so that I love to give someone instructions. I love to be a Pilates instructor. I loved it when the old lady, skin and bones, first time I met her, said, "Now don't try to get me to do a sit-up. I'm tired of that." Right? Here's some baggage for you and stuff to learn about as an instructor. And I never did. But I gave her cueing, and the cueing that she followed had her effortlessly and smoothly, without realizing what she was doing, sit right up and look at me in my eyes. Look at me in my eyes. And that's all I gave to it as an instructor, and moved on. Because we had done something that she obviously had a thing about. I had never expressed any expectation of having her do a sit-up. All I did was give her cueing, and from the cueing it seemed that she was able to do what she did. Now, what cueing was that? Was it secret? Probably not. But you could probably bet it had to do with squeezing the inner thighs together with endpoints of tension at the ankles and having an open air passage and squeezing the inner thighs to cause an exhale, and maybe that alone to cause just. Why am I telling you this? There was another example I was going to where, don't do any of this without being guided through it, right? All of that disclaimer stuff. Alright, so I've been very lucky in my life to be a living, moving spring of support and protection for a client, and to make this any sense at all, I've got to literally explain the exercise. So standing on the Cadillac, holding the bars, I guess because we've been talking about the inversion. Something else altogether different that is way down the line of difficultness, but still is out on thinner ice, and most adults are used to going. I set up the swing that has a strap. I set up the swing from the Cadillac that has a strap underneath it, so there's a foot in the strap, a foot here, and then a foot up on the bar holding the swing. And then in the same monotone of cueing, I say just push down on that bar and flip over and come down on your feet. And many, many times, to make it worth doing this, the student does what I tell them, because they trust me, because so far the instructions haven't caused them any pain. And as they're doing this, my hand is out under their head and neck and ready to not catch them literally totally, but to easily break their fall. And so I'm within that range of protecting the performance. And a student comes down out of that, I protect their head so they don't hit the bar supporting the spring, the swing, but they come and they stand up, and where are they? They're trying to remember the last time they did that, and the only time they can remember doing that was when they were on a schoolyard jungle gym that used to exist, those semi-domes, something like that. Just the high from that experience can be a great place to end the session. Because I would never have done that toward the beginning. Well, I say never, and yet in this broadcast, I tell you when it was the second exercise, when inversions was the second exercise. But no, this is somebody with a normal, healthy body that I've worked with for like 50 minutes and given evidence of the, see, the point is a Pilates instructor is involved in corrective exercise. And the corrective means that you see movement and then you offer correction, right? All the way to the point where the student learns how to make the correction on their own. But as the instructor, you're there to teach them, so often you're the one that's providing the correction. And I got lost in what I was talking about. The two places and the, oh, your perception of what's next or where to go is totally intuitive and spontaneous and creative and explorative. Everyone thinks, I think, or I would think that by and large, a general perception of MMP would be that it's threatening because it doesn't allow me to make of it whatever I want to. And that's true. That's the bad news. But the good news is that because Pilates has an essence of its own, snobs, imposters, forgers, interlopers, trespassers, all of them are more easily discernible because of the essence of what it is and your awareness of that. So within MMP, it will always be what it is. In the year 4040, it will be still the same thing. The same poem, the same sequence, and the same experience. It'll just be understood a lot better for what it is. Life can't live forever. Read between the lines. See behind the curtain. See what's not behind the curtain. Recognize that exercises are each a piece unto themselves, and there's a nature to a corner like there is to the beginning of a sequence and to the end of a sequence, and that there are pieces that actually fit together, and that regardless of how many exercises you know and can put together that fit together nicely, on the other side of all of that that's a picture of a star. The actual assembled picture is of the solar system. And yet galaxies outside of the solar system are also portrayed. When you recognize the picture on the puzzles, then the stress of or the desire to have all of the puzzles and have the whole puzzle assembled diminishes. Doesn't completely satisfy, but when you recognize that the further you swim upstream looking for the facts and looking for the truth, and the more people you meet who knew Joe, and the more people share with you what they have in archives that figure you're worthy of sharing with, the more you realize that there aren't enough answers in just the pieces by themselves. And it's not until you look at how the pieces are constructed that it becomes apparent what fits together. And what fits together, so what's my best take on that? Right now, spit it out. The definition of the idea. So out of the mind, or the idea of contrology is uniform, eccentric loading flowing through progressive patterns of movement. I hope that information allows you to add 2 and 2. To add to what you already know and have it enhance your value as a Pilates instructor. Direct your thinking. Geist.